Throughout the semester, it's been touched on, especially in Dustin Kidd's book, that pop culture is controlled by corporate interests. As such, I decided to look into how pop fiction portrays corporations themselves. It turns out, not in the light you would expect if it wanted us to willingly obey them. Through movies and video games alone, I found countless examples of the big bad corporation trope. These stock villains always have memorable logos and a pleasant public face to cover up their secretly gained profits, always acquired through private militaries, genetic engineering, violent practices, criminal connections, untested science, and excessive employee abuses. Interestingly enough, they do create worthwhile technological advancements. So I'm going to look at several examples of this trope across both video games and movies, keeping in mind that I also believe it is prevalent in books as well. So look at what patterns emerge and to see why this would be. For my first example, I used something that is both a video game and a movie series, Resident Evil. Pretty much the main antagonist is the Umbrella Corporation, seen here with its really kind of cool logo. They're a corrupt pharmaceutical company that, in the universe, revolutionized medicine, but also secretly worked on unregulated drugs and bioweapons, including the T virus, which accidentally started the zombie apocalypse. Rather than hide it or try to get away from it, they actually took advantage of the chaos to test their bioweapons, and then they nuked the city to hide all it. Here's one of their monsters. Here's a joke comic sort of making fun of the nonsense of the game series plot. Vault-Tec is another great example. In Fallout universe, the world has been destroyed by a nuclear war. But years earlier, in the 2050s, Vault-Tec was contracted by the government to keep us all safe. They built a series of invincible underground vaults, 17 of which kept us safe as advertised. The other 100 or so, well, were used to study how people would react in certain conditions, supposedly to help create a better society in the future. In one, people were sprayed with psychoactive drugs that made them violent. In another, a person was put alone with a box of puppets. In another, there were 999 women and one man. In another, people were told that they had to sacrifice someone every year or they would all die. All of these were created solely for the purpose of observation, and almost all of them resulted in hundreds, if not thousands, of horrible, violent deaths, which they all smiled about with their little mascot. He's a fun guy. Probably my favorite logo. The Oddworld series was something I really enjoyed as a kid. You played on this alien world dealing with politics and corporate espionage for the rights of a few oppressed. Rupture Farms is a massive meat packing industry that uses the Mudokons, who are basically an alien version of the Western ideal of Native Americans that they use for cheap labor. One of their known atrocities is using blind ones to dig up their Mudokon ancestral graves and destroy their traditional religious sites. But their other great atrocity is that they hunted the animals they use for food to near extinction, and, not wanting to give up on their supply, they planned to start killing the Mudokon population and selling them for meat, including to other Mudokons. On a side note, they also have scientists who love to torture and brutalize both animals and sentient beings for both scientific advancement and for fun. The Gabbit race, which is a race of fish people most people didn't know were sentient, literally only has one survivor because of them. But doesn't their meat look delicious? That's a Mudokon. Aperture Science. Portal series is a fun puzzle game where the story is not easy to tell, but is there. After Science started as a curtain manufacturer, which is one of those random details that these corporate backstories have, before moving into experimental science, including a lot of human experimentation. Most of their horrors came after they were taken over by intelligent robots that killed most of the people, took the survivors, and started putting them through psychologically harrowing tests. BioShock games have two candidates for this list. Fontaine Futuristics. Now, a brief explanation. The BioShock games take place in an underwater city called Rapture, which is basically a parody of Ayn Rand's idealistic city from Atlas Shrugged, if you're familiar with that concept. So a con artist found out about Rapture and moved there with the plans to take it over. Aside from secretly running most of Rapture's smuggling and criminal operations, he also funded and supported the invention of plasmids, a drug that both gives you superpowers and mutates you and is extremely addictive. When he found out it was addictive, that was actually a bonus to him. That meant people would buy more. When they started running out of supplies, one of his scientists revealed to them that female children make the best production hosts. So he started an orphanage solely for the purpose of getting little girls for their experiments. He was also instrumental in starting the Civil War. Ryan Industries was started by Rapture's founder. In response to Fontaine Futuristics' plots, they took over the company in violation of their own beliefs, continued the use of plasmids in order to control the population, established a brutal dictatorship, and turned the Little Sister program, the mutation of the girls, into law. Here's someone mutated by plasmids. Here's a little girl after she's been experimented on. I've never actually played any of the Final Fantasy games, but I'm vaguely familiar that one of them involves a villain, the Shinra Electric Power Company. They found a revolutionary new way to generate energy, which changed the course of the planet and gave them a monopolistic power. Part of their plans involved drilling into the center of the planet and draining its life force, thus risking the extinction of all life. But if it wasn't, they would make great profit and gain more power. It's not just major games, but also the indie scene. For example, Remember Me has the company Memorize. They developed technology that allowed people to upload their memories into this computer system, share them with friends, and even get rid of the ones you don't want. They started a conspiracy to control the world through this by secretly using it to alter people's memories through, well, I think you could see how people could control others that way. There's a scene near the beginning of the game where they're actually throwing opponents of their corporation into a fire, and sometimes their things malfunction and reduce people to slobbering messes with no sign of visible intelligence. Although I do have to say, they do have my favorite logo out of all the ones in this list. Let's step away from video games for a bit and get into movies. Soylent Green is a classic about an overpopulated world where everyone is fed by the innovative Soylent Industries. They have found a new form of plankton that they can eat, if Homo sapiens is now officially considered plankton. As the famous line goes, Soylent Green is people. Running Man is a fun Arnold Schwarzenegger movie about a dystopian future where the US is dominated by this entertainment conglomerate known as ICS. They use their influence and power over the media to keep people from thinking or questioning about all the major social crises extending over the country. And, just as importantly, they demonize anyone who tries to point them out, to the point of convincing people that they're murderers and terrorists, and then brutally killing them in a popular reality show. Here's their host. He looks to be a guy you can trust, right? Spectre doesn't really fit onto this mold because it's more of a terrorist organization than a corporation, but they use a lot of corporations and nonprofits to fund things that support them. And I think someone really wanted this acronym to spell Spectre. The popular sci-fi hit Repo Man features the Union, which completely revolutionized medical technology and ended the organ donor crisis. See, they created organs that you could buy, which great and save millions of lives. And if you can't afford them, they will send people who will literally rip them out of you while you're still alive. Although apparently not with a chainsaw. Another video game series that features an evil corporation is Max Payne. A seer developed several top-secret drugs for covert military projects, but these drugs happen to make their victims way too mentally unstable. So instead of continuing it, they just released the victims into the streets, where they killed the protagonist's wife and started the events of the game. Of course, they later started to sell the drug through the mafia. And of course, like to many evil corporations, they have their own products. It's not just major movies either that feature these evil corporations. Moon, a relatively unknown British sci-fi film, features Lunar Industries, which revolutionized the energy industry through materials harvested on the moon and solved all of our oil crises. They also saved costs through an innovative method. They killed their original workers, cloned them, and convinced the clones that they were the original workers until they expired, at which point they killed them and repeated the process ad nauseum. To use a really popular example, there's Cyberdyne from Terminator. They advanced computers, engineering, robotics years ahead of what would have been without them. So far ahead that they invented the robots that eventually overthrew humanity and killed millions. Whoops. I had a lot more examples, but because I was getting tired of making this, I decided to just list all the ones that I had planned to but did not go into detail about here. Abstergo, Armacon Technologies, Hyperion, Tyrell Corporation, Omni Consumer Products, LexCorp, Oscorp, Multinational United, Wayland Utari, and I have no doubt whatsoever that I could keep going for a while. Why is it so prevalent? Private militaries and secret experiments harken back to Cold War events. Real-world corporate scandals give the common man reason to distrust these entities. Corporate leaders are strangers to most people, being someone most of us will never meet. As Kidd notes, even the rich are portrayed as freaks. Besides, most of us have been frustrated by a corporation at least, even if it's just over something such as a cell phone contract. Noting how many of them have genuinely benefited scientific advancement in their respective universe, maybe this is an artist's attack on pragmatism. Art's objective benefit is difficult to determine, it gets criticized for it. So maybe this is a symbol for how objective benefits can be horrifying without emotional guidance. I asked Kidd over Twitter about this phenomenon, and he speculated that it was a sign that corporations were so powerful that they need not fear criticism. So, what do you think? Considering that all of these films were made, funded, and or controlled by major corporations, why would they portray major corporations as evil? Why is the good corporation so rare? Could this prevalence of a trope be part of our own attempts to put corporate control as a bad thing in pop culture? Does Kidd have a point? Well, that is my media